AITA for not wanting to follow my mom's rules if I'm paying half the rent. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. If you had told me a year ago that I would be seriously considering moving in with my mother again, I would have laughed in your face. But life has a funny way of throwing unexpected circumstances at you, and here I am, weighing the possibility of sharing an apartment with her, until yesterday, when everything took a turn for the worse. To give some context, I am 23 years old, freshly graduated from college, and finally at a point in my life where I can afford my own place without needing roommates. For the past 2 years, I have been living with friends, splitting rent, enjoying my independence, and finally having control over my own life. It has not always been easy, but I have been making it work, and I have loved every second of it. Growing up, my parents were not the strictest, but they did have a very traditional mindset. They had rules that I, of course, did not always agree with, and those rules did not just disappear when I turned 18. Even as an adult, I was expected to abide by their expectations while living under their roof. I had a curfew, even though I was well past the age where that should have been a thing. I was not allowed to get tattoos. I could not have sleepovers with my boyfriend at the time. And what frustrated me the most, I was never allowed to go on trips with my friends, even though it was always just girls. My friends would plan amazing weekend getaways, and I was the only one who had to make up excuses for why I could not go. But at the end of the day, I understood. Their house, their rules. I may not have liked it, but I respected it. That is why I moved out when I was 21. I wanted my own life, my own freedom, and to be able to make my own choices without having to justify them to anyone. It was the best decision I ever made. Then, a few months ago, everything changed. My parents decided to split up, and just like that, my entire childhood home was turned upside down. The divorce was not messy in a dramatic way, but it was still heartbreaking to watch. My mom, who had been a stay-at-home mom for years, suddenly had to figure out how to support herself again. She started working a regular job, but money was tight, and with the house being sold, she needed to find a new place to live. At the same time, I was already in the process of apartment hunting. My lease was coming to an end, and I was excited to finally have a space that was fully mine, without roommates. My mom knew about my plans, and one day, she approached me with an idea: what if we got an apartment together and split the rent? At first, I was genuinely open to the idea. It made sense financially. Rent is expensive, and splitting it with someone would give me more breathing room. Plus, I love my mom. Despite our differences, we have always been close, and I wanted to be there for her. I knew this was a difficult time for her, and I figured that if we set clear boundaries, we could make it work. I made sure to tell myself that this would be different from living at home. This was not me moving back in with my mom, this was two adults sharing an apartment as equals. Or at least, that is what I thought. Yesterday, everything came crashing down. We were sitting in the living room, casually talking about things, when I mentioned that I had a tattoo appointment coming up. My mom immediately made a face, the same disapproving look she had given me ever since I was a teenager whenever I talked about things she did not like. I brushed it off at first, thinking she was just going to make a comment and move on, but then she said something that completely blindsided me. Enjoy it now, because once we're under the same roof again, your lifestyle is going to have to change. I thought I had misheard her. I laughed awkwardly and asked what she meant, and that is when she laid it all out. She told me that if we were living together, I would have to follow the same rules I had when I lived with her and my dad. I was stunned. I asked her if she was serious, and she did not hesitate to confirm that she was. No staying out late. No tattoos. No sleepovers. No traveling if she did not approve of it. Everything that I had fought so hard to break free from would suddenly be forced back onto me, even though I would be paying half the rent. I told her, very clearly, that if we were going to be getting an apartment together as equal adults, I was not going to follow her rules. It made no sense to me. If I was a child still living under her roof, that would be one thing. But I was a grown woman, financially independent, splitting the bills. There was no way I was going to let her control my life like that again. She did not take it well. She immediately got upset, saying I was being disrespectful and rude. She told me that I was ungrateful, that she was disappointed in me, that I was making this all about myself instead of thinking about how difficult this situation was for her. She went on about how she was my mother, and as long as we were living together, she expected me to listen to her and respect her wishes. I stood my ground. I told her that I was not willing to do that, and if those were her expectations, then we would not be getting an apartment together. I was not going to put myself back into a situation where I had to ask permission to live my life. Now, she is furious with me. She keeps saying that I am selfish and that I am abandoning her when she needs me the most. She thinks I am being stubborn and difficult just for the sake of it. She even told me that if I truly cared about her, I would be willing to compromise. But I do not think this is something I can compromise on. I am 23 years old. I go out with my friends when I have a day off. I travel because I finally have the means to do so. I have a trip to Cancun planned for my birthday this summer, something I have been looking forward to for months, and now, apparently, I would have to cancel that if we live together. It is not even about what I do inside the apartment. I would never do anything that would make her uncomfortable in our shared space. But outside of that, she should not have a say. I love my mom. I truly do. And I do not want to damage our relationship. But I cannot ignore the overwhelming feeling that moving in with her would be a massive step backward. I spent so long working toward my independence, and the thought of giving it up, even partially, makes my stomach turn. I do not know if I am being unreasonable. Maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe she really does just need support, and I should be more willing to meet her halfway. But at the same time, I cannot shake the feeling that if I give in to this, I will end up resenting her. And that is something I do not want. Update 1. At first, things were surprisingly smooth. We moved in, settled into our routines, and for the first few days, it genuinely felt like we were equals sharing a space. There were no sudden rules, no overbearing expectations, just two people cohabiting like normal adults. I started thinking that maybe I had overreacted, maybe she really had changed, and this could actually work. I was careful, cautious even, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but as the days passed, nothing happened. No passive-aggressive comments, no lectures about my choices, no subtle attempts to control my movements. She even seemed happy. Relaxed, even. We would eat dinner together, talk about our days, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were just two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I started letting my guard down. I told myself I had misjudged her. She was adjusting, just like I was. Maybe all the tension before moving in had been nothing more than nerves. I wanted this to work, and she seemed like she did too, so I let myself believe it was possible. Then, just as I was getting comfortable, she sat me down one evening with a smug little smile and said, "I wanted to give you some time to relax, but now that you're home, we need to talk about some ground rules." Home. That word alone told me everything I needed to know. My stomach dropped as she straightened in her chair, folding her hands like she had been preparing for this moment all along. She wasn't just going to suggest compromises or discuss boundaries. No, she was going to establish rules. And not rules for both of us, rules for me. She proceeded to lay it all out as if it were the most natural thing in the world. No coming home late because it was disrespectful to the household. No sleepovers, because she wasn't comfortable with it. No bringing friends over unless she approved of them first. No traveling unless she agreed it was safe and reasonable. And, of course, no more tattoos, because according to her, I had already ruined my body enough. I sat there, gripping the armrest of the couch so tightly that my knuckles turned white, barely able to believe what I was hearing. This was exactly what I had told her I wouldn't tolerate. This was exactly what I had feared would happen. I reminded her, calmly at first, that I wasn't a guest in her house. I was paying rent, just like she was. That meant I had just as much right to make decisions about my own life as she did. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable, I just wanted to live the way I had been living for the past 2 years, making my own choices without having to answer to someone else. She didn't even hesitate before shutting me down. "You're my daughter, and as long as we live together, I expect you to respect my rules." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing keeping me from screaming. Respect. That was what she called this. Not control, not infantilization, respect. The kind of respect that only went one way, the kind that required me to bend and shrink and fold myself into something that made her comfortable. I asked her why she thought she had the right to dictate how I lived my life, especially when we were equals in this apartment. She looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "That's not up for discussion," she said, and walked away like that was the end of it. Update 2. As expected, things only got worse from there. Every time I tried to push back, she doubled down. She didn't just reject my attempts at setting boundaries, she seemed to take them as a personal challenge, an invitation to see just how much control she could still exert over my life. It was as if she had convinced herself that my independence was temporary, that if she just applied enough pressure, I would eventually cave, fall back into line, and let her reclaim the authority she had lost when I moved out 2 years ago. The illusion of peace we had for the first few days was gone, shattered beyond repair. What replaced it was a constant, simmering tension that hung over the apartment like a storm cloud, heavy and unrelenting, always on the verge of breaking but never quite letting up. She started waiting up for me when I came home late, turning it into a ritual of disapproval. It didn't matter if I had been working a late shift, out with friends, or even just running errands. Whenever I walked through that door past whatever arbitrary time she had deemed appropriate, there she was. Sitting on the couch, arms crossed, her face locked in that unmistakable look of silent judgment. She wouldn't say anything at first, just watch me like a disappointed warden catching an inmate sneaking back into their cell. Then, after an excruciating pause, she would sigh, slow and deliberate, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. And then came the comments, always wrapped in the thin veneer of motherly concern but never quite masking the underlying criticism. It was always something about how late it was, how unsafe it was for a young woman to be out alone, how reckless I was being. The message was clear, she didn't approve, and she wanted me to feel it. At first, I tried to brush it off, to act like it didn't bother me. I had dealt with this kind of thing before. But it became harder when she escalated her tactics. If I was out late and she didn't know where I was, I would get texts, long, suffocating messages about how worried she was, how inconsiderate I was being, how it wasn't responsible for a young woman to be out so late. It didn't matter that I was 23 years old. It didn't matter that I had lived on my own for 2 years without incident. In her mind, I was still a child, still under her roof, still subject to her rules. And if I didn't respond fast enough, the texts would be followed by missed calls. The first time it happened, I assumed there was an emergency. But no, she just wanted to know where I was, what I was doing, and when I was coming home. And she didn't just stop at monitoring my schedule. She started inserting herself into every aspect of my personal life, as if she could slowly chip away at the independence I had worked so hard to build. She made a point to be in the living room whenever I had friends over, lingering just long enough to make them uncomfortable. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. But after the third or fourth time, when I caught her watching our conversations with thinly veiled disapproval, I knew it wasn't. She didn't want me to have a social life in this apartment. She wanted to make it as difficult as possible for me to bring people over, to make it so exhausting that I would eventually stop trying. And it worked. My friends felt it too. They started leaving earlier, their conversations stilted and awkward under her gaze. The easy laughter and carefree energy that had once followed me everywhere started fading, replaced by an underlying tension that I couldn't shake. Eventually, I just stopped inviting people. It wasn't worth the effort. Then there was the guilt tripping. She started strategically planning family events on the same weekends that I had personal plans. The first time it happened, I didn't think anything of it. The second time, I started to suspect it wasn't a coincidence. By the third time, I knew it was deliberate. I had told her weeks in advance that I had a trip planned, something I had been looking forward to for months. And suddenly, just days before I was supposed to leave, there was a big family dinner planned for that same weekend, something she swore she couldn't reschedule. When I told her I couldn't go, she acted like I had announced I was cutting all ties with the family forever. She sighed, shook her head, muttered about how she was just trying to keep the family together. And when I didn't change my mind, she resorted to silence, a full 24 hours of cold, passive-aggressive silence, making sure I felt the weight of her disappointment in every step she took around the apartment. And then, of course, there was the no boys rule. My boyfriend wasn't even allowed to step inside the apartment. Not for a sleepover, not even for 5 minutes. Even if he was just dropping something off, even if we just needed to figure out where we were going, it was a hard no. Every time I tried to push back, she shut me down. This was her home, she said. She deserved to feel comfortable in her own space. Apparently, my comfort was irrelevant. And then, one night, I walked in after a late shift to find her cozied up on the couch, with a man. At first, I thought I was imagining things. The apartment was dimly lit, the only glow coming from the television, casting soft shadows across the room. And there she was, sitting way too close to someone, her body language unmistakably comfortable, her laughter quiet but familiar. It took me a second to process what I was seeing. He looked at ease, like he had been there before, like he belonged there. I stood frozen in the entryway, my mind racing. And then it hit me. She had made such a big deal about my boyfriend. She had laid down strict rules, set unyielding boundaries, dictated exactly how I was supposed to conduct myself in the space we both shared. And yet, here she was, completely unbothered, bringing her own boyfriend into the apartment like it was the most natural thing in the world. I finally forced myself to speak, my voice casual despite the anger building in my chest. If she got to have her boyfriend over, did that mean the rule no longer applied to me? She didn't even hesitate. She didn't look embarrassed, didn't look guilty, didn't even attempt to justify the blatant hypocrisy. She just scoffed, like the question itself was ridiculous, like I was a child who didn't understand the way the world worked. It was different, she said, because she was an adult. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I reminded her that I was also an adult, in case she had conveniently forgotten, and that if she got to have her boyfriend over, then I had the same right. She dismissed me immediately, waved a hand like she was swatting away an annoying insect. It wasn't the same, she said, because she was my mother. Because she was older. Because she was more responsible. Because she knew better. Because, no matter how much I wanted to pretend otherwise, I was still her daughter, and she was still the one in charge. I stood there for a moment, something inside me twisting, breaking, snapping under the weight of all the contradictions. This wasn't just unfair, it was absolute hypocrisy. And if she thought I was just going to sit there and take it, she had another thing coming. Update 3. I decided I had two choices, I could either keep fighting a losing battle or go full petty mode. I chose the latter. If my mother wanted to treat me like a rebellious teenager instead of an equal roommate, then I would give her exactly what she expected. I stopped tiptoeing around her ridiculous rules. No more trying to appease her, no more trying to keep the peace. If she wanted to play this game, I was going to play it better. First, I started staying out even later. If she was going to wait up for me like I was 16 again, then I was going to make sure she had plenty of time to sit there and stew in her frustration. I made a point of coming home well past the imaginary curfew she had tried to set, walking in with a breezy, casual attitude like I had all the time in the world. If she tried to give me a lecture, I just smiled and shrugged, saying things like, "Sorry, I must have lost track of time," before walking straight to my room. I could see the irritation on her face, the way she wanted to snap back, but she knew she had no real authority over me anymore. Then, I started inviting people over constantly. If she was going to make my friends feel uncomfortable in our shared space, I was going to make sure she got used to their presence. I brought them over for dinners, for movie nights, for long, loud conversations that lasted well past midnight. I made sure the apartment was always filled with chatter and laughter, filling up every quiet, judgmental space she tried to create. If she lingered in the living room like some kind of self-appointed chaperone, I didn't acknowledge her. If she huffed and sighed dramatically, I ignored it. She could either deal with it or move out, but I wasn't going to shrink my life just to make her comfortable. And then, for the best part, I made sure her hypocrisy didn't go unnoticed. I started dropping little hints about her rules to her boyfriend. It wasn't hard. He was a nice enough guy, and he actually seemed to enjoy casual conversation with me. I started slipping in comments about how strict she was, about how I wasn't allowed to have my boyfriend over, about how I was basically being treated like a child despite paying half the rent. The first time I mentioned it, he looked genuinely confused. "She doesn't let you bring your boyfriend over?" "But she lets me stay," he asked, frowning. I just gave him a knowing look and let him sit with that information. It didn't take long before he started questioning her about it, and I could see the way it made her squirm. Then came the grand finale. The moment that sent her over the edge. I booked another tattoo appointment. I didn't tell her about it. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't hint at it beforehand to soften the blow. I just walked in one day with fresh ink, let her see it, let her freak out, and then casually reminded her that it was my body, my money, and my choice. The second she noticed it, her eyes widened in horror, and I could practically see the internal meltdown happening in real time. She launched into another speech about how I was making terrible choices, how I was ruining my body, how I clearly had no sense of respect. I didn't argue, didn't try to reason with her, didn't even bother justifying my decision. I just shrugged and walked away, leaving her standing there with all her outdated beliefs and misplaced disappointment. It didn't take long for her patience to wear thin. She tried to lay down the law again, tried to reset the dynamic to what she was comfortable with, but this time, I didn't just push back, I went nuclear. I laid it all out. I reminded her that I was paying half the rent, that she wasn't my landlord, that if she wanted a child under her roof, she should have moved in with an actual minor. I told her that this arrangement was supposed to be about two adults sharing a space, not about her recreating the parent-child dynamic she refused to let go of. And then, I pulled out my trump card. I told her that she kept demanding my respect because she was my mother, but that she didn't respect me as an adult. I told her that this wasn't working, that I wasn't going to spend my life walking on eggshells just to make her comfortable, and that if she didn't start acting like we were equals, I was moving out. She stared at me, stunned. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Maybe she had convinced herself that no matter how much I pushed back, I would never actually go through with it. But I was done. The next morning, she sat me down and, for the first time, actually listened. Begrudgingly, through clenched teeth, she agreed that if I was paying rent, she had no right to police my life. I didn't fully trust that she'd keep that promise, but from that day on, things changed. She stopped waiting up for me. She stopped giving me side eyes when I mentioned my boyfriend. She stopped trying to control my every move. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. And if she ever tried pulling that nonsense again? I already had a new apartment listing bookmarked.